As many of you know, I said that I was long on Boeing in this video posted 8 days ago when Boeing was about $173 per share. I had been in Boeing for a few weeks before posting that video, and here's my current cost basis. Since then, Boeing has had a huge run up and then a huge run down. What am I going to do with my Boeing shares? Am I going to sell, buy, or hold? Coming up next. Let's do it. What's going on, everybody? My name is Matthew. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking all things Boeing. Boeing has had a hell of a past few days, dropping pretty aggressively to say the least, and I feel like I now owe it to you to at least tell you what I'm thinking right now. Give me the format. First, a quick recap of why I bought Big Bad BA in the first place. Second, what news could potentially move the stock price of Boeing moving forward? And finally, third, what am I going to do with Boeing? Am I going to buy, sell, or hold? And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of a reality check for all you new investors. Let's get right into it with first a quick recap on my initial bull thesis for Boeing. We all know that Boeing creates aircrafts for airliners, but what a lot of other people forget about is their well-diversified business. They actually have two whole other branches that generate revenue. They've got Boeing Global Services and Boeing Defense Systems, and to me, the latter is the one that's more important to talk about. As mentioned in my last video, 31% of Boeing's 2018 revenue was from the US government. 31%. And again, try and digest this fact right here. 21% of the Department of Defense's weapons procurement budget is dedicated to one company. Want to guess who it is? Oh yeah, I'll take a guess. It's Boeing. Just look at this fact sheet released on March 31st, 2020. Awarded contract for this, awarded contract for that. These are all contracts from the US government and other governments paying Boeing to build more defense systems. And on top of that, we can see that the US defense budget has shown a pretty heavy uptrend over the past couple of decades. We saw a bit of a lull here, but it's back on the rise, which means more money to Boeing. So as I said before, Boeing is just too entangled with the Department of Defense for the US government to let anything happen to them. There is really no world where I see Boeing going under, but you should never rule out all possibilities. It's just a very small chance in my opinion. So now that we know that, we can talk about their airliner business. Yes, people have been canceling orders, but a lot of customers have been deferring their orders. And this is great news considering the circumstances, because it means that these customers still want the planes, just not right now.
For obvious reasons.
And this maintains Boeing's famous backlog of orders that's just going to turn into revenue once these planes are made and delivered. And I do realize this backlog has seen kind of a beating lately, and a lot of orders are still being canceled, but that was one of the risks that I actually outlined in my last video. And even with orders being canceled, this backlog is anything but negligible. And lastly, when I recorded my first video on Boeing, they were still down over 50% from their all-time highs. Then it came up and it broke that 50%, but now it's back right down below 50%. And why does this matter? Well, a lot of stocks are extremely overvalued right now. Not many are still under 50%. But does this mean that I think Boeing will get back to all-time highs anytime soon? Not necessarily, and actually probably not for a while. So now let's talk about some news that could potentially move Boeing's stock price up or down. So there are three main pieces of news that I want to talk about today, and the first one is a very big potential catalyst for Boeing, so let me set the scene.
Douchebag take one.
Hopefully you know that Boeing's 737 MAX airplane was grounded by the FAA, and this was one of the reasons why the stock price took a bit of a tumble before Rona even happened. In order for the MAX to get ungrounded, Boeing needs to pass a recertification test and test flight from the FAA. That is expected to happen by the end of this month, June. And this would be huge for Boeing because more people can then smash that like button. In all seriousness though, these videos do take a very long time to research, record, and edit, so I'd really appreciate just hitting that little thumbs up. Thank you so much. This would actually be huge for Boeing if they can get the MAX ungrounded, because they currently have a bunch of them in storage, just waiting to be delivered to customers. Once they can deliver those planes, that's when they can record their revenue. So where are we in this process? It's been cited that Boeing has been in constant contact with the FAA while working to ready its 737 MAX for flight once again. It's also known that Boeing restarted production on the 737 MAX on May 27th. And lastly, and this is important, Boeing, not the FAA, is the one who requests a test flight. Boeing is the one who says, hey, I'm ready, let's try this out. So if Boeing has been in constant contact with the FAA this whole time, and Boeing is the one who decides when they want to be tested, it's not like the FAA just say, hey, today's the day, you better pick up your stuff and go to the test site. Then we can reasonably conclude that Boeing would not propose a recertification flight if it were not certain it would pass. Conclusion, Boeing should, keyword should, have their 737 MAX recertified by the FAA by the end of this month. And you have to understand that this 737 MAX issue is something that has plagued Boeing stock for several months and months and months now. We could see it resolved very soon. But there's also some not so good news. In fact, it's actually bad news about the 737 MAX jet that we just talked about. A key supplier was asked to halt work related to the 737 MAX, or the grounded plane. The supplier said they received a letter from Boeing on June 4th, asking them to put a pause on all additional work for 4 737 MAX shipsets and avoid starting production on 16 737 MAX shipsets to be delivered in 2020. And shipset just refers to all the work that the supplier does on a single 737 MAX. So in other words, Boeing just kind of came out of nowhere and said to its supplier,
hold on, stop your work, drop what you're doing, we need to slow things down.
So the two big takeaways from this are that the timeline for the 737 MAX being reintroduced into commercial use could be extended yet again, and that is not good. And the second takeaway, kind of similar to the first, is that this could mean that Boeing will be ramping up production of their 737 MAX at an even slower rate than previously anticipated. And the reason this isn't ideal is because it might put some more financial stress on the company, as they still have to pay off debt, and it's harder to pay off debt when you're producing planes at a slower rate and therefore producing revenue at a slower rate. And the second piece of not so good news, the third piece overall, is that we have observed a spike in Rona cases across at least 20 states. And if you watched my airline video, one of the things that I said needed to happen in order for airline stocks to keep going up is that we cannot see a second wave. Working with razor thin margins. And finally, they cannot have a second wave of the Rona. Well, the possibility of a second wave has never been higher, and airline stocks are reacting accordingly. I'm not saying I was right, but obviously I'm joking. I'm not that special. Anyone would have made the same assumption if they heard that cases were coming back again. It's just that some people chose to ignore that risk when airlines were rallying at crazy valuations. Okay, back to Boeing, and how does this affect Boeing? This could mean more canceled orders for Boeing, more deferred orders for Boeing, and less potential revenue for Boeing. But I will say I think this is short term, because in the end, it doesn't matter which airlines survive. In the end, someone's always going to be ordering planes from Boeing. Say Southwest is the last airline standing. Now obviously this is an extreme example, but say Southwest owns 100% of the entire airline industry and market. Well, I'm sure a lot of these airlines that were hypothetically going bankrupt in this hypothetical situation canceled and deferred a lot of their orders from Boeing, because obviously if you're going bankrupt, why would you keep ordering new planes? But the fact is, after these companies are well long gone, after they're bankrupt and Southwest has taken over their market share, Southwest still has to service millions upon millions of customers. And to do that, Southwest would need to order more planes, right? And in my opinion, the way I see it, it's less about how many planes each company is ordering and more about how many planes the entire industry as a whole is ordering. So guess who's filling those orders? Oh, let me guess this time. I think it's Boeing. So what am I doing with my Boeing shares? As some of you may know, this is my biggest position across all my portfolios, so this is definitely kind of an important decision. I am selling my I'm kidding. I would never, no, guys, come on. I am holding for the long term, and if this gets anywhere near my cost basis of around like 145, then I might consider adding more. Personally, I think this drop is a collective of two main things. One, the people who control the money in the stock market are saying, we need a breather, so they just decided to make it happen. And the other thing is that there's a huge wave of new retail investors, specifically on everyone's favorite app nowadays, Robinhood. A lot of these Robinhood investors, not all of them, just started investing and do not do a lot of due diligence. They just happen to hop into the market at a time where there was an unprecedented rally. Mark Cuban says the worst thing that can happen to an entrepreneur is to succeed on their first try. Well, I think the same thing goes for investors. The worst thing that can happen to you as a new investor is to enter into the stock market when we have one of the best 50-day rallies in history. Because now you might think that the stock market is easy money and you don't really have to do that much research. But in reality, you do. Because when this happens, you need to have a reason why you're going to hold, why you're going to sell, or why you're going to buy. And if you don't have any reasoning or research to back up that decision making, you're probably going to end up selling. That only makes the sell-off worse. And on top of that, a lot of these investors are using what's called margins. Go to any value investor or long-term investor, and most of them will probably tell you not to use margin. This basically means you're using money that you don't have to invest in the stock market. And if that money goes red, well, you're gonna have to pay up. So now all of these retailers who have piled into these stocks the last month are freaking out, and they're just gonna make this a lot worse than it needs to be. But if you guys are freaking out over 2 or 3 red days in a row, then maybe investing is not for you, or maybe you just need more time in the market. So if you have so little conviction in the stock that you own that after 2 or 3 red days you're considering getting out of that entire position, you really need to reconsider and take a better look at yourself, whether or not you did enough research and whether or not you are investing in the right companies. But that's why I'm here. I'm here to try and give you my research. I'm here to try and teach you how to do research, try and show you it's possible, and try and share my experiences with you. So I apologize if that was a bit of a ramble, but I feel like it was a message I needed to get off my chest lately. And to answer the question, no, I am not selling my Boeing stock. And honestly, if you follow my Instagram, you'll hear a lot of these thoughts that I just laid out in this video on my stories on a daily basis. So go ahead and do that. It's completely free 99. It's just updates on what I think is happening in the market on a day-to-day basis. If you found any value in this video, and I hope you did, please feel free to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. As always, we'll end our video with the quote of the day. The stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. That is from Papa Buffett, and I cannot think of anything more relevant today. If you don't have the patience to sit through a couple red days, or even sit through another, drop in the stock market, then you are just going to sell your shares to someone else who's willing to wait it out, and they're the ones who are going to be making money, while you are the one who's going to be taking a loss. Does this mean you should just never sell and hold on to every stock that you own? Definitely not. You should always be aware of fundamental changes to a company, and you should only invest in companies that you really believe in. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching to this point in the video. You are the real MVPs. Don't forget your peace and thank yous.